All right, I have got a new stock that I have recently purchased. It is one of those stocks that I have not been this excited for since I really started working with Palantir. I purchased SoFi last week, and I'm incredibly excited about SoFi, and that's one of the main stocks I'm going to be covering a lot more. This is a new stock that is one of those out there companies, and it's one of those companies you really deeply have to understand to be able to understand the business side of them, but also understand sort of the science side behind them. I am talking about Ginkgo Bioworks, ticker symbol DNA. Now, you might have heard of this company before. You might not have heard of this company. It depends on how much you care about synthetic biology and how much you care about genomic sequencing. ARC and Cathie has made genomic sequencing, I would say, kind of a more popular thing in the synthetic biology world, especially because of some of the stocks they've bought and some of the transparency they've associated with the stocks they bought. But I've been seeing her load up on the stock for a while. And since January 2022, I've known about this company. So I've known about this company for a long time. And the reason I was always hesitant to buy it is because they classify themselves as a biotech company. And whenever I think of a biotech company, I'm like, okay, if they bring a drug to market and the drug fails, then boom, the company's over, right? The company can't make any money. The company's not going to succeed, all that type of stuff, right? Because if the drug fails, the drug fails. And so for the longest time, I stayed away from them. And honestly, it's a good thing I stayed away from them because they were trading at, $7, $8, $9, $10, $11 throughout the year. They have finally gotten down to about $2.90, $3. They had a low of $2.09. And that's when I started looking at them a little bit more, especially because I saw some of the big players loading up a lot more. And I was like, okay, so the big players are loading up a lot more. The valuation has decreased 77% year to date. Why are people still loading up on a stock that's 77? Is it just to buy the dip, or is it like, are they loading the dip at a massive level because there's a real opportunity that the market's not recognizing here? And then I started getting deeper into them. And so I have other videos coming out in the future. A lot of content I have is audio only. It's not videos because I don't want to just like bombard videos on the channel. So you can follow the link in the description below, sign up for my new startup. It's totally free, and you can get access to all my audio content around Ginkgo Bioworks. But I think there's an opportunity here in genomic sequencing. And if you believe there is a world in which programmable DNA, and I'll explain what that means in a second, is going to be relevant, part of the future, and part of the way in which we create new things, the way in which we stop climate change, the way in which we stop diseases and find solutions to a lot of problems, then DNA is one of those companies I would personally be betting on, given I believe they're one of the market leaders in this space. So overall, what's the investment thesis? I'm not going to outline everything today, but I'm going to outline sort of my core top line level thesis, and then we'll go from there. First of all, let's look at just the business in general. Price to book of 0.95, 1.4 billion in the bank, $5 billion market cap, trading at $3 now, down 77% from its all-time high of around 14, 15 bucks. I think this is the point for me. This is not financial advice. You have to make your own decision. You have to do your own due diligence. This is the point for me where I feel very comfortable putting in 3, 4, 5 grand for the asymmetrical upside that this thing 3, 4x's in the next couple of years, maybe 5, 10 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. Or I could lose all of it, right? Like that's the risk I'm totally fine with taking. The valuation has gotten to the point where it seems as if unless we have a really big macro headwind where everything goes down, S&P goes down to 340, right? Like all that stuff happens. I feel as if this stock is approaching a bottom, or it is consolidated to a bottom, especially because we haven't seen it go lower than some of the bottoms that it's already hit. Could it go lower? Yes. Every stock could theoretically go lower. I just think a macro event would have to affect this stock, not necessarily a company-wide event, especially because they've been raising their estimates and raising guidance, and they're going to end the year doing a lot more revenue than they guided for in the beginning of the year because they're just making a lot more money. So that's the first thing. I think their financial health is in a pretty good space. Price to book, cash in the bank, very, very little debt. So ultimately, from just a pure technical perspective, it seems like it's a good buy at this valuation. Number two is the actual bull case of what the company does. So genomic sequencing is basically saying, hey, there are cells in our body, and each of these cells have programmable DNA. So just like on a computer, you have zeros and ones, which are like bits and pieces of, or which are bits of like coding, right? And you type a bunch of code and then you make all these applications, which is like super cool. That's the beauty of the internet revolution, is that you can build stuff on top of the computer, and it's a new way to organize information. That has not been done in the world of genomic sequencing at scale. So what I mean by that is that we have ACTs and Gs instead of zeros and ones on every DNA, on every cell that we have. These physical cells, they're not virtual like code, they're physical, can be programmable through genomic sequencing. And when you program these pieces of DNA, the opportunities that exist are quite literally endless. You can do many, many, many different things with programmable DNA. One of the examples is the Impossible Burger. So one of the things in the Impossible Burger is hemoglobin, which is an animal protein that makes it feel like it's bleeding, and it creates a sort of burger-esque type of feel, right, when you eat that, but it's not meat. That's the whole point of it. That hemoglobin protein was synthetically created through synthetic biology, genomic sequencing, programming the DNA in order to be placed inside of the Impossible Burger. Meaning the way you were able to get an animal-like feeling taste on something that was not an animal, which is obviously good because you don't have to like kill animals, which means you don't have to hurt the environment, right? There's all these bull cases to why it's good to have these types of Impossible Burgers or these types of food, led to the ability for now a programmable DNA to be replicated, which allowed the ability for the Impossible Burger to be created. That's one use case, one example. And that's such a silly use case and example, right? Because you think like Impossible Burgers is like, all right, whatever. There's a lot more use cases and there's a lot more ways in which programmable DNA can affect in a lot of different ways. One other example is nitrogen. So here's a very specific example. The plant microbiome is essential for global farming practices, but much of the power of microbiomes has not been tapped into. Joins team of microbiologists in partnership with Ginkgo, and engineers can test thousands of samples at a time thanks to high-level throughput automation. This enables system-level analysis of thousands of strains isolated from soil and rapid prototyping of engineered strains, which are then tested in greenhouse and field conditions at a 12,000 square foot facility. Their first challenge was reducing the amount of industrial nitrogen fertilizer used to grow crops like corn, wheat, or rice. The industrial production and application of nitrogen fertilizer uses an estimated 3% of worldwide natural gas and contributes to 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. By enabling microbiomes to produce nitrogen in the roots of non-legume crops that can't fix nitrogen themselves, Join could dramatically decrease agriculture's environmental and energy footprint, meaning instead of taking nitrogen, you can produce it yourself. Now, if you're not able to produce it, how do you do that? You use genomic sequencing and programming the DNA into the crop so that they could create the nitrogen themselves without having to take it from the atmosphere. That is the possibility of programmable DNA and genomic sequencing. And with the cost decreasing about 50% year over year, there's like a different types of Moore's law for genomic sequencing in the context of programmable DNA. The costs are only getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to do this. So the overarching bull case is that the way the internet revolutionized the way we communicate with information is the same way in the same infancy stage we are in when it comes to genomic sequencing and the ability for us to revolutionize how biology, which is every part of our world, is going to be related to different cell-based programming applications to build programmable DNA, which again, use cases are inevitable, or use cases are, plentiful. That creates the opportunity for a major new revolution in the genomic space and in the biology space. The reason I'm betting on Ginkgo is because I believe they have a platform to do this. So they are not a biotech company. They didn't raise $1.6 billion in their IPO, which is the largest biotech IPO ever, because they are a drug company, because drug companies don't raise that much money because a lot of times drugs fail. They are a horizontal platform. They have a 200,000 square facility in Boston. All the founders are MIT chemical engineers, PhD graduated. And they all kind of came up with this idea that if we had a platform that could make it easier, the same way Amazon Web Services, AWS, makes it super easy to start a startup tomorrow because you have compute that you can pay $10 a month for to be able to store your data. What if you could take that same type of model that has worked in tech for the past couple of decades so effectively and efficiently, but bring that to the biotech world? It costs about $5 to $10 million to start a biotech startup. So to program your DNA already, there's an upfront cost of $5 to $10 million. What if you could use a virtual cloud-based lab, essentially? So Ginkgo Bioworks uses their lab that has a bunch of robotics, a bunch of automation, a bunch of economies of scale to be able to reduce the cost, to be able to actually enable all the programmable DNA and things that they're testing. And by doing that, boom, you've now allowed thousands of different programs eventually in the future to just start immediately without having to worry about all this upfront cost, and DNA handles all the biotech portions of it, and you as the company handle all like the business sides of it, and you get to at least test your idea. That is why I'm betting on them. They have a platform, and there's been a lot of use cases over the past year that has shown their platform to be relatively successful in actually enabling different biotech companies to build their cell-based programming applications on top of them. So I see them as a pick and shovel play. ultimately, if they are successful, they are the App Store. They are the Amazon Web Services. They are the thing, and that thing has a very differentiated moat because there's a lot of network effects of data and cell libraries that they're getting every single day that is only making their data stronger and stronger and stronger to figure out when the TikToks, Instagrams, Facebooks, and YouTubes, all these different apps want to build their app on top of our app store. We don't know which one's going to be the winner, right? There's a bunch of apps that failed, but there's a bunch of apps that win. The apps that win are going to have access to our data that we're going to be able to give them to be able to help them win even better. These are called their cell libraries. And we're going to actually give them the platform to build their thing on top of so that they can commercialize and take their product to market. Now, how do they make money? This is the other thing I like. They take a royalty or equity stake in the downstream revenue of a successful commercial product. So only when their customers win, Ginkgo Bioworks also wins. Now, they also make money through things like biosecurity, which is some of the stuff they did in the pandemic that we can talk about in future videos. They also make money through Foundry revenue. Foundry is the name of their platform that actually allows the facilitation of building out the testing for the genomic sequencing. So there's those ways they make money, but the real bull case here is that if you have 1,000 programs running and 5, 10, 15 of those programs end up being really successful commercial products, and you have equity stakes in them in perpetuity, or you're getting royalties in perpetuity, then you have a company that has built a AWS, a iOS app store in an industry that theoretically has existed for a couple of years, and they're building new industries on top of that industry. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Google, these are all new industries around advertising and information on top of iOS's app store. All the dating apps are a new industry of dating on top of iOS's app store. The app store takes like a 30% fee on top of all of that, and so they always collect the downstream revenue of every successful product because the app store gave them the platform and the ability to find distribution for their product. And that's what Ginkgo Bioworks is doing in the biotech world. So ultimately, it's super exciting to me. I'm very interested to get deeper into them. I'm also interested to expand my knowledge base and my horizon of thought. You know, I've obviously covered Palantir deeply. I'm still going to be covering Palantir. I'm covering SoFi. That's a big one I'm in. But genomic sequencing and biology is something that, and synthetic biology is something I've never really gotten into. And it's just so exciting to have another field to look into. And I would not be entering into this company if I didn't feel the valuation was the right time to enter. When they were a $15, $23 billion company, I would never have bought this company. But at $3, I'm like, all right, it's starting to look like it's, unless the macro just destroys everything, then things are going to keep going down. If that doesn't happen and we have a little bit of a rally, then I think this is one of those stocks that could benefit, especially given the growth. Now, they're not profitable. They're losing a ton of money, but they are growing about 250% year over year. And that's kind of what you're asking for at this stage of the company, to get that entire market of synthetic biology and then have this absolutely differentiated moat from every other synthetic biology play, because now they've got the data, they've got the applications, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the robotics, they've got everything that is needed to be able to build a successful app store for the next decade, which is really exciting to me. Shyam Sankar, Palantir COO, is also on the board of this company. I'm really impressed by management. I'm really impressed by leadership. I've listened to Jason Kelly, the CEO, talk many times. I have videos coming out in the future reacting to some of his interviews. It seems like he understands this at a very, very deep level, and he's someone that I want to bet on. At the end of the day, you're betting on people, and Jason Kelly is someone that I want to bet on. So those are my thoughts. Cathie Wood owns 100 million shares of this company. I now own some shares of this company. I'll do some videos in the future to give you guys some more updates on it, but let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I'll see you in the next one.